Hi everyone, I'm Enzo and welcome to this week's Plant of the Week. This week we'll talk about the Phalaenopsis. Otherwise known as moth orchids, it's a hugely popular genus within the family of orchids, especially for their long-lasting blooms as well as ease of care as a houseplant. These orchids are native to the tropical areas of Asia and Oceania. However, the common varieties that are sold to us are hybrids which have undergone extensive selection in order to better handle indoor conditions. In their natural environment, these orchids are epiphytic, meaning they grow under the canopies of large trees, using their thick aerial roots in order to anchor themselves to any available surface. When grown as a houseplant, Phalaenopsis orchids prefer bright, indirect light, ideally an east-facing window. However, if they need to be put near a south or west-facing window, make sure to use sheer curtains or arrange your plants to create a dappled light effect, as the intense sun can scorch their sensitive leaves. Phalaenopsis are tolerant to average household temperatures, usually around the 18 to 20 degree mark. However, they will thrive best in between 25 and 30 degrees. It is also important to note to never let nighttime temperatures dip below 15 degrees, as this will cause the buds to shrivel and drop. These orchids are normally sold in clear plastic containers where the roots are very clearly visible. Now, a good practice to follow is to wait until the roots have turned a bright silvery color, as this indicates that they are starting to dry out and are ready for a follow-up watering. Make sure to not water your plant if the roots are very clearly green. To water your Phalaenopsis, run it under a gentle tap for a few seconds or let it sit in a saucer full of water and drain after a couple of minutes. Water your orchid frequently in the warmer months when it's actively growing and cut back during the winter. You may have heard advice such as placing an ice cube on top of the substrate, which will slowly melt and keep your orchid watered. This is not advisable as the cold is likely to damage the roots. During active growth, make sure to fertilize your Phalaenopsis with an orchid-specific fertilizer, as these are formulated to encourage brighter, larger blooms as well as healthy vegetative growth. After the flowers have fallen, you may be asking yourself how to get your orchid to rebloom, and to do this there are a couple of different methods. If the last blooms have recently fallen, cut the flower stalk back down to 2 nodes before the last spent flower. This will usually encourage a side shoot to form and a new batch of blooms to emerge. If the flower stalk has shriveled and died back, then cut it right at the base where it meets the leaves. This will usually then prompt your orchid to go into a period of dormancy where it will need to gather resources and energy before flowering once again. If it has been a couple months or even years since your orchid last flowered, then place it somewhere a couple of degrees cooler for about a month or so. This will usually trigger it to then start flowering once again. And there you have it. Phalaenopsis are low maintenance plants that will reward you with beautiful blooms year after year. We hope this video has been helpful in your care of them, and keep an ear out for our next video on general houseplant care. See you next time.